up the pathway where I go. Got no time to fool around. Know that I've been up before the dawn.
Boston, Massachusetts has one of the largest urban gardening communities in the country. It is just one example of the growing popularity of urban gardening in the United States.
So between 42 and 44, there were probably 18 to 20 million victory gardens in the United States. Most of them were little, in somebody's, backyard or that kind of thing. But also, the commons. There were some sort of model gardens, Copley Square, and of course, here in the Fens. It's kind of the perfect, setting.
Okay.
So it was basically everything that was manufactured and canned. All of that and preserved was kind of going over to overseas. So it was a way to kind of get people involved on the home front. It was also important because they were rationing all sorts of food items. So it was both of those things. I think it was probably as much for morale as it was for food production. But having said that, it was very impressive the amount of produce that was grown. So Richard D. Parker, for whom the park is named, was one of the founders, and he and some buddies met at the Harvard Club and decided that they wanted to do whatever that needed to be done to keep this area as a food producing as a victory garden. In the 50s and the 60s, there were several proposals to utilize the land for. There was a boys' school. I think there was a hospital, and 3 attempts to turn it into a parking lot for the ballpark. They're set up in these rows where there's an empty, what's called a windrow between.
Okay.
So what'll happen every 6 weeks is that we'll turn this pile over into the empty rows so that the bottom, which is nicely cooking, will then be on the top, and the top will be on the bottom. And so we kind of get a nice even, compost that way.
In the 1970s, there was a rise in the interest for community gardening. Patches of land around Metro Boston were targeted for use, but laws needed to be adjusted before the land could be used for gardening.
When I went into the legislature, or while I was campaigning, met with a group of folks up in, essentially where Roxbury Community College is now. And these folks were from mostly Puerto Rico, and said, well, there's all this vacant land. And they wanted to know if I became rep, would I make that land available so they can grow food. Of course. And I got elected. And the first bit of money that I got in the budget was to clear the area and put a fence around it. And I think there was some good soil there to begin with. And they started the gardening.
Yo hace tiempo no trabajo allá.
Pero si lo extrañas. It's been a long time since I've worked in Puerto Rico.
No lo extraño, pero sí hay diferencia en los cambios que hay de
I don't miss
aquí
it,
allá.
but there are differences in the changes from working there and working here.
En las plantas.
In the plants.
Bueno, pues yo vine aquí, muchos años, yo llevo aquí muchos años, yo he caminado por los gardens, caminado por varias partes, pues, donde sembraban, porque por la Geneva, por acá, por la clínica, por la Brujil, por donde sembraban, habían jardineras, habían plantas sembradas, y yo iba mirando, y hasta que logré conseguir ese jardín allá en Manhattan, y ahí estaba, siempre estaba ahí, casi 14 años.
That the differences, he said, were more kind of just going to these community gardens and checking them out and seeing how people were actually cultivating the earth. And he just continued, like in the South End, wherever there were any community gardens, he would go check out and see the progress as to what they were planting. And after a while, he was just like, all right, I can do this, and that's when he picked up the garden initiative. ¿Por qué te gusta todavía bregar con jardines?
porque esa es la situación.
Después de tantos años.
Esa es la situación que yo me entretengo en mis años de vejez. De la ansiedad que yo tengo, en eso que yo me he entretenido aquí, bregando con plantas, no haciendo otras cosas.
At his age, he feels as though he does it as a pastime to keep him busy, because that's pretty much all he knows what to do, and he enjoys it.
As we were saving up money to buy a house, we kind of thought that we could get more bang for our buck if we bought a house together, my wife and her sister family. And so we started looking for a place that had enough room for us all to do our thing, which included trying to grow as much as we could. So we were house hunting for about a year actually, before we came up with this discovery, which was quite a find in this neighborhood, to get something that was in our price range, that had enough land to actually do something fairly decent. So we bought the house about 3 years ago, and we bought it around this June, July, something like that. So I think 2010 was our first big year of growing, and that's when we built all the raised beds, came up with the general layout. So we grow mostly the stuff that you would put in a salad. In the winter we have a PVC tube structure. You can see part of it over here. It starts with a wood frame that is 15 feet square, covering these two beds. And then rebar is nailed down into the ground, and the PVC pipes are bent over it. And then we cover it with a thick plastic. Good piece of it. So, the sides of the house, we have a door on one side, so that we can get in and out during the winter. It's exactly like the greenhouse. It keeps it, I would say generally speaking, maybe 20 degrees warmer than it is outside. Like these tomatoes would probably normally die out in the middle of October, but if we've got the hoop house up, we can probably get them going into November.
Jesse Ben Hazel, the owner of Green City Growers, has been helping people in the Boston and surrounding areas start urban gardening over the past 4 years.
Honestly, I'd say that you could expect, in terms of a residential location, the typical size is 2 or 3 of these beds. So it's not a ton of space, because people are really space limited in the Boston area. And so we try to optimize growth in small space.
Raised beds are one of the things that make urban gardening possible in a range of different spaces. They have 3 layers: the frame, the root barrier, which protects the roots, and the drainage layer, which helps the bed shed excess water.
What this is drainage board. This system is the same system we use on rooftops. And so it has the drainage boards underneath. It's a different soil mix than we do in the containers ground level, because it's more lightweight, and it drains faster. So that's something you have to take into consideration on a roof, is that you don't want to retain a ton of water, because that's a ton of weight that's all of a sudden on the roof. This is our compost kind of corridor. And a lot of the stuff that came up are all things that just came up through the seeds in the compost, which is kind of fun. The only market that we work in that's not educational is restaurants, which is purely production. So it's a totally different game. We have one farmer of ours that's specific to restaurants, because it's a completely different style. It's more about how can we optimize the growth here.
John Olinto, the owner of the Be Good restaurant chain, started a rooftop garden on the top of a Washington Street garage next to their location in downtown Boston, with the help of Green City Growers.
The idea came from really our customers. There was a guy that was coming to our store, and he told us about the idea. He introduced us to Green City Growers, and we created a quick partnership, and before you knew it, we had, back then we had 7 baby pools on our roof. They're great because they're very cheap. You know, I think these kiddie pools cost us like $15, and they're self-contained and they're very durable. So the fact is that you have an initial investment, and it keeps producing food, which is really exciting. So it's cool. I mean, if you think about it, like, there's a lot of people looking down on us, you know? You remember that you're using space that normally would never be used, you know, that's just going wasted all over. But really the reason why we did it is because the dream is that we're going to serve real food, and knowing where your food comes from, if you grow it yourself, that's pretty real. And also it tastes really good.
As people living in the United States face more economic hardships, we see a revival of interest in sustainable living and an increase in community and private gardens. Gardening is a great way for people to add food to their tables, feel empowered, and be involved in the community. With a number of people interested in urban gardening in Boston, gardens are popping up on rooftops, in front of businesses, schools, parks, and in homes. And Boston is rapidly becoming a center for urban gardening in the United States.
Well, I've got a story, ain't as wild as it seems, about a man and his chase of the American dream. He started with nothing such a long time ago, made a life in the hills where the wildflowers grow.